Namaste, dear ones. So today we're going to be tackling shame. If you love this content and you love learning about personal development work, self-healing, the inner child, and how you can truly recover from things like codependency, don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell. This way, every time I upload a new video, you'll be the first to know. So this is a topic that I think that if every single person on the planet was able to really look at, we could make tremendous shifts in the world. We can make tremendous progress in personal development, and we could make tremendous progress in each of our relationships. When I was going through, I would say, the dark night of the soul, I was going through my biggest breakdowns when my life was falling apart. And, to be totally real with everybody, I've had many breakdowns, many. I had breakdowns when I was 7, breakdowns maybe even earlier, breakdowns at 9, 10, 12, especially at 12. That was a rough year. 15, going through all of my high school years and having such a crazy relationship with my first boyfriend that was so codependent. And I was such a people pleaser, and I was so below the veil seeking validation. I was so thirsty for love. And every time he raised the bar, I would just jump. If he was upset, I was upset. I was only happy if he was happy. And if he was upset, it was my fault. It was because I wasn't good enough. There was something innately wrong with me as to why he was upset. And if he found favor in me, that meant that I was good enough, which is a classic codependent, shame-based paradigm that is below the veil of consciousness. It's subconscious, and it's created in childhood. It doesn't happen by itself. So I didn't know that I had all this shame about who I am. So shame makes us feel like we are defective, that we are absolutely unlovable, and we don't belong to anyone or to anything because there's something innately, terribly wrong with us. We don't even know what that is. We don't know why we feel this way, but we feel this way. And I think most of us operate in life completely unaware of how shame is keeping us small, how shame prevents us from living out our gifts, because each of us, including you, has a gift to bring to the world. Just like a rose has the gift of a particular fragrance, right? Sunflowers, they have their job to do. A peacock has its job to do. A peahen has her job to do. A rainbow has its job to do. The rain has its job to do. A wave has its job to do. And so when we look out into nature, we just stand back and metaphorically sit on the moon, you'll see that in nature just is in alignment with all things that are love and abundant and growth and beauty and harmony. We see it all over the place, right? But what if an oak tree had shame about being an oak tree and thought that it should be an apple tree? What if an apple tree felt ashamed, like there was something wrong with it? It would not produce apples. It would not bear fruit. So it would play small. Imagine if a peach tree thought that it was supposed to be a banana tree, right? It would play it small. It wouldn't grow. No, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to really suck up these nutrients from the soil and to suck up the sun. I'm not worthy of this love. Someone else deserves this water, not me, certainly not me. We wouldn't have any peach trees. And that's how it is with us. When we have experienced shame in childhood by an authority figure, or even a peer, by someone that we feel like we would like to or should be a part of, and we feel rejected and abandoned, then we internalize that feeling. And if we have enough of these feelings, what ends up happening is this shameful experience that happened outside of me is now inside of me. It becomes the narrative of my inner critic. And so now I've been shamed, which is rejected and abandoned and unloved on the outside due to circumstances that are not my fault. And as a survival mechanism, I'm going to try to figure out how to be good enough so that I could belong to my family of origin, so they don't continue to reject me, so I don't continue to feel not good enough, right? So it's a survival. There's a survival aspect to shame. Because if I feel shame, then that motivates me to kind of like alter my behavior to make sure that mommy stops rejecting me. And so I develop a personality type that subjugates my needs to match my mother's needs or to fulfill my mother's needs. Or I develop characteristics and traits that prevent me from speaking up, right? When we have shame, we're afraid to peel ourselves off the wall. And so rather than really doing the things that we feel that are innate in us, like I've always felt, since I'm 7 years old, I've felt like a teacher. It's a weird thing to say. It's a weird thing to feel. Like, you know, there's something in me. There's something in me that's driving me to like share, right? And it was a weird feeling to grow up with because I felt so ashamed. And then many of you know I write about it in The Road Back to Me, my first book. I write about being 12 years old and having this experience of having a friend, you know, getting a friend in 7th grade and trusting her and feeling so seen by her, you know, and sharing my secrets with her and telling her that I have this boy that I really, really like. And I couldn't wait to tell her. It was a delicious moment in time that was completely annihilated by what she did with this information. And it was just a delicious time, and I let down my guard. I had grown up feeling so afraid to express in my home because my mom was so verbally abusive and emotionally abusive. And I never, ever, ever remember feeling safe around my mother. And at 12 years old, finally finding someone that I could share with was delicious. And what she did was she ended up telling this boy about my fantasies, about my journals, and it destroyed me. And I found out that she told him during lunch one day at school when he came to the threshold of the door, and I could see it like it happened yesterday. It's just an emotional flashback. But what's really cool after all of this discovery work is that I can have the memory and the energy. Some energy is still there, but not the intense energy, because I've developed empathy for that little girl who thought she loved this boy. Dreaming about him was my escape, right? So it was a survival skill of the wounded little girl that I was, that felt so alone and rejected and abandoned by her own family. I didn't fit in anywhere, right? And so I created this fantasy around this boy, that I could talk to him, that he was waiting for my phone call. He was someone that said, it's okay, you know, I love you. Even if they don't love you, I love you. It was very comforting, right? It was a fantasy, but it comforted me. It made living in this rigid, stoic, cold, stifling, judgmental, toxic environment doable. And she told him, this little girl told him. And he showed up in the threshold of my classroom and he said, hey, you. He called me by my last name, and I looked, and there he was, the boy of my dreams with the ocean blue eyes and the sandy colored hair. Glory. And he was pissed. And he said to me, I don't want you thinking about me. I don't want you looking at me in the halls. I don't want you speaking my name. You are disgusting. And he went on to say some other things. And I had a complete panic response where I went deaf. I felt like my heart was going to land on the desk. And many of you can relate to that feeling. Everything just began to slow down. Peripherally, everything started to go black. I really felt like all of my systems, bing, 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 bing. It was complete trauma overload, and that was a traumatic experience. I did not have the ability to process what was happening. I was a little girl. This fantasy about him saved me. So I guess I still have some energy because I'm getting emotional attached to the experience, but I think it's the energy of empathy this time rather than shame. I have empathy for that little girl that I was, that lived through that experience, that everyone thought was just this cold little brat. No one knew I was suffering. You know, I walked around with a chip on my shoulder because I was afraid to be vulnerable. Because when I was vulnerable, I was made fun of. If I cried and I said what I needed, I was made fun of. And then when I started to get rigid in myself. And I thought, well, maybe the answer is to be rigid and cold and not show vulnerability, which was so backwards for someone, a child like me, that felt like she processed the world through her emotions. So it was so debilitating. I was called a cold fish. Oh, Lisa has no emotions. So I was like, okay, who in my life can I go to with this? There was no one. My parents didn't believe in therapy. That my parents thought that that was quackery, that emotions was silly, that, if you were emotional, there's something wrong with you, So I was very emotional, so I wasn't letting that cat out of the bag. And so when I had this full-blown trauma response, I didn't tell my parents. I floated home, and the idea that got me through it was, I'm going to end my life. I'm going to take my own life. And I had this experience back then where in that whole feeling of this is it, I know it sounds crazy, but I heard a voice say to me, don't do it. One day you'll show them. So here was this theme of show them. Here was the teacher theme again. But I didn't know what I was supposed to teach. But I knew that I couldn't do this. I could not hurt my sister this way, who was innocent. I couldn't bring this shame to my brother. My grandmother had taken her own life when my dad was 4. I couldn't hurt him. And even my mom, I knew that if I did this, my mom was going to feel like it was her fault. It would have been our secret, but this would have destroyed her. I knew it. So, and in those moments, I'm so thankful I had those moments. I realized I can't be bad. I can't be bad. That was a huge aha moment for me. And I'm so grateful that I had that moment of clarity where I realized I can't be all that bad. I remember wanting to feel connected to my mother, being very aware that I don't have a connection to my mom, and how can I make her love me, which is codependency, right? Because love is conditional. I'm not worthy as I am. I have to prove that I'm worthy of you. So I became very other focused from a place of complete emptiness and total shame, and thinking that if I could just get my mom to love me, then I would feel good about myself, almost like I needed it to get to the next level, which we know that we do. Now, if you study the Erik Erikson model, then you know that feeling loved and feeling connected is like step 1. And if you don't feel like within the first 18 months connected, which is another word for love, and bonded, which is another word connected, and feeling seen and feeling safe. If you are loved, you feel safe, right? If you don't feel safe in the first 18 months of life, then that will affect all of the other stages of emotional development that you have to go through. I didn't know that at the time. Little girl that was called crazy, that I was called bad, I was called selfish, I was called a drama queen, you name it. It is the absence of empathy. It is the absence of feeling seen. It is the absence of compassion. And you can grow up in the nicest looking house on the block and still struggle with this shame, this disconnect from your parents, from parents who are emotionally neglecting you. So it doesn't have this be this big T trauma. It is this feeling that I am not worthy of this thing called love. And therefore, we internalize that as children. All children take responsibility for it. It's just, again, it's survival, because if I created this problem, then I could solve the problem. It's survival to think that you're the problem, because it's too frightening and too overwhelming for a little child to think mommy and daddy are messed up, so it must be me. So shame is survival. Assuming that you did something wrong is survival. Idealizing your parents is survival. And so we become adults who are still operating under the veil of consciousness, below the veil of consciousness, and out of this subconscious neurological programming. Our thinking is everything. The way we think has been distorted, and the way we think affects the way we feel, and the way we feel affects the actions we take, and the actions we take affect what happens in the 3D, or it affects our outcome. It is our manifestation. So thinking is everything. So if you came from a home that was shame-based, right, or you ended up feeling ashamed as a child, it has affected the way you think about yourself. It has affected the way you think about your career choices. It affects whether or not you really put yourself out there in that managerial position. Or if you work in the mailroom and you want to work yourself up, right? The less shame you have, the more able you are going to be to say, hey, I think I can handle that, and I think I can handle that, and I'll do this, and you'll be extraordinary. And soon, in 5 to 10 years, you're the CEO of the company, worked your way up from the mailroom, right? But if you have shame, you might always stay in that mailroom. And I'm not saying if you work in a mailroom, that's something to be ashamed of. I'm just asking you to question, how much shame are you carrying? How much shame do you feel? So what does shame feel like? I'm not good enough. Brene Brown, I think, says it better than anybody else. I'm not good enough, and who do you think you are? Now, fast forward, I wanted to share also how my struggle with shame is still ongoing. And I want to do it because I recognize that being transparent is the only way that we can really liberate ourselves. And so I wanted to talk about how, even though I have all of this recovery work on my side, and every day I wake up early and I still do personal development work, like literally I'm up at 3:30. I'm filming this at let's see what time it is. I'm filming this at 6:30, and I've been up since 3:30 working on myself. I know that I have to because I understand the brain as far as I understand the brain today. And I know that the default mode network sits behind my eyes. It's a bundle of fibers, and it is operational when I am not in a learning phase. And that's not good news for me, being the adult child of two unrecovered adult children of alcoholics. So I was raised by two unhealthy people. So my default mode network, or my subconscious mind, is the result of the environment, or the petri dish that the cell that I was born into. So I know that I have to keep that at bay. I have to manage that. I know that I have to manage the mental mind, and I have to counter the natural narrative, or not the natural, the more organic or the programmed voice that tells me that I'm not good enough. I have to manage that. And throughout my life, especially as a life coach, I've peeled myself off the wall. So when you do that, you make yourself a target. You do. Anytime you step out courageously, in vulnerability, this is who I am. And now in this arena, I wrote a book so people can write negative reviews there, or I create a video. Anybody can say anything, really. Anybody can attack you in any arena, anytime you peel yourself off the wall. So it's really scary. And Brene Brown talks about this during her TED Talk, how she was attacked the next day about the way that she looked, which is so common, right? So women put themselves out there in a vulnerable place, and then, people mock you. Not everybody. There's, thank goodness, more people than not appreciate vulnerability, and they'll embrace it. Those are wise people. Those are compassionate people. But there are people out there who, because of their own character issues, they will attack you. I did an Instagram Live, and I had a number, unfortunately it was like 2 or 3, I imagine they were young kids, saying I was too old to do an Instagram Live, right? I had too many wrinkles. I had, I shouldn't be doing what I was doing. And I was grateful in that moment. I was like, it didn't really bother me that much, right? Because it's so superficial that you're attacking my looks. But okay, I was able to see that. So that's really not my issue anymore, where it would have been when I was in college. Like, if you're saying that I shouldn't be wearing what I'm wearing, or I'm too heavy, or even if I'm too thin, because I had an eating disorder back in college, I was very susceptible to that type of criticism. But now, interestingly enough, how the shame monster rears its ugly head, I have to manage the shame that shows up. And I think that's true for all of us, and I wanted to talk about that. So my parents operated through shame, right? My dad has shame, my mom has shame, and they played this dance, right? And they pretended that shame wasn't an issue. It was a very controlled relationship where they kept their emotions at bay. Neither one of them was ever honest about how they felt. And that's why when they had children who cried or made a mess, they exploded. They didn't know how to deal with it. And so the best way they knew how to deal with it was shame us for having feelings. And then what happens? We stuff our feelings. We all have eating disorders, right? We all have low self-esteem issues. We're all afraid to, set a boundary with someone. We're so afraid of being abandoned. All 3 of us, my brother and my sister and I. But hey, my parents are happy because they have little soldiers as children. Doesn't that make them look good? They didn't understand that process. It took me, the unraveling of the codependent life that I had had after my breakdown in my marriage, and even my emotional breakdown and my physical breakdown, for me to recognize what was really happening. And then when I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, my ex didn't want to have anything to do with it. He didn't want my life to change and his life to change, right? So I felt, here is my wound. I am being rejected again. So when I'm codependent and stuffing my feelings, I'm playing a game. I'm not being my authentic self. I'm trying to be good enough for my mom and good enough for my dad and good enough for my ex. I am little Lisa, 3 years old, begging for people, my husband and my mother and father and even his family, please accept me. I am alone. I am desperately alone. It's an illusion. It was always an illusion. And I was chasing this carrot as if my savior was outside of me and not inside of me. I think we do that. I think many of us do it. We can do it in a career. You know, I've trained world-class athletes who chased this medal or chased this first place, experience. And as soon as they dropped the deadlift bar, they were empty again, right? As soon as they won the medal, they were empty again, right? The chasing of the approval. Maybe if I'm do this, then I'll finally feel good enough. If I get that house, maybe if I get married, maybe if I have a child, maybe, if I buy that second house, maybe if I get that promotion, maybe if I make enough money, right? We're all chasing and chasing. So the shame is chasing us like a boogeyman, and we are below the veil of consciousness, not recognizing what's really happening or why it's happening. Our mind is designed to run away from pain, so we're running away from pain. These patterns that have been created in childhood that are stinking thinking, we're not looking at our patterns of thought objectively. We stay below the veil of consciousness, acting out these patterns, and we just end up in toxic codependent relationships. If you're codependent, you end up staying in relationships with people who are takers. And so we end up catering to these people, making excuses for these people. Why? Because if I'm in a relationship, that keeps that leg of the shame octopus at bay. I must be okay. This person kisses me. This person sleeps with me. This person wants to have a family with me. I must be okay. Well, I knock off a tentacle. I must be okay, right? If I cater to this person and I take care of this person, I must be a good person. Poof, we knock another tentacle of shame off, right? But on some level, we're not revealing our true self because we're so afraid. And the vulnerability scares us because I think on some level, if I show you who I really am, you'll leave me, right? So I'll just pretend that I'm happier than I am and make the world think that there's nothing wrong with me, and that'll keep that tentacle away. But there are many more tentacles still active, and they creep in to every area of our life. So I wanted to share how that has crept up in my life as a life coach, because I've always wanted to teach and I've always wanted to inspire, but you're not good enough, and who do you think you are, right? You're not Tony Robbins. You're not Oprah Winfrey. You're not as great as Brene Brown. Who do you think you are? Who's going to listen to you, right? I'm not good enough, and my story and what I have to offer, even though it's like it's welling up inside of me, like I want people to know that you can live above the veil of consciousness. It's not you, it's your programming. I want you to know if you feel shame, it's because someone made you feel like you don't belong and you're not good enough. Someone did a really crappy job raising you, and that ain't your fault. And if you can heal your inner child and you can develop empathy for the self, there's nothing that you can't do. Nothing. But you have to learn how to set boundaries. And when you set boundaries, the people that you have been addicted to are going to get pissy. So you have to prepare yourself for the fallout, dear one. I want people to know that. Why? Why? Because it feels so good to come out the other end of that. And we need people who are fulfilled and love-based, not fear-based, right? Thank you, the work of Marianne Williamson. I'm not as good as Marianne Williamson. Maybe I shouldn't be making YouTube videos. Maybe I shouldn't keep writing books. Maybe I should close all my Facebook groups. Maybe I should shut my YouTube channel. Maybe I should stop offering my online coaching program for people who are trying to heal the inner child, the 12-week class. Maybe someone in my family says, well, why do people listen to you? You're a life coach. I feel devalued. So as a life coach, what I've had to manage in my life is all of that stuff. And I think it's helpful for people who watch people like me to know that if we're really being honest with ourselves, we have to be honest that we're still dealing with this stuff. And I think that me sharing this with all of you, I'm hoping what people hear is that this is an ongoing process and it doesn't go away like instantaneously. It's something that we have to manage over time. And it's something that if we can interject some level of empathy for the self, then I think we can heal from it. We can, when I say heal from it, we can dissolve it, we can move past it, right? So I just wanted to share that with all of you about my own personal life. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about where shame can come from in your life. So parental alcoholism, for instance, will result in dysfunction. And children and family members who are forced to adapt to unpredictable arguments, for instance, there's a controlling factor in the home. There is enabling, there's inconsistent care, there's humiliation, and the emotional, spiritual, physical, and psychological unavailability of a parent is a reason why those of us who look like we come from healthy homes actually don't. And so if your parents were psychologically and emotionally unavailable, that can cause shame. If your parents were in a codependent relationship, in an alcoholic relationship, you were raised in a home that lacked clear boundaries. One parent may have covered for the other parent, which is denial. And denial may have been the cornerstone of your family's dysfunction. When we come from a shame-based home, no one's talking about it, right? So it's the secrecy. Dad's an alcoholic. Secrecy, I feel unloved. Secrecy, mom went to jail. Secrecy, mom had sex with a stranger in the bed next to me or in the bunk bed above me, right? Like, I can't tell my friends this stuff, and shame festers. It's like it's just boiling inside of you. It's a terrible, terrible concoction. And what we fail to realize is that as a result of living in toxic families and situations, we become denial-based, and we don't realize that we have been denied basic developmental skills like asking oneself, how do I feel, right? What do I want? What do I need? And what are my dreams and what are my goals? So the greatest consequence may be shame when you come from a home that is unavailable to you emotionally, where you feel invisible and you don't feel seen, where there's triangulation, where there's scapegoating, where mom is struggling and dad is struggling, and yet they're unaware. And so what happens, they're dysfunctional and they don't see you. You know, one of the most popular cases that I hear is when, you know, my dad's an alcoholic and my mom's acting like he's not. Dad's not drunk. He's just tired. Or dad's just silly. Dad wakes up, he apologizes, mom forgives him, and the cycle continues, right? And the children are just, they are dealing with the unpredictability, and they are living in survival, and they're ashamed of their family, and they feel ashamed, and they feel different than the people that they go to school with, and they're carrying this, and then sometimes they become bullies, and sometimes they become, the bullied child, right? It's just not a good situation. So shame can occur as a result of physical and sexual violation and emotional violation. It can occur due to a verbal assault. It can occur due to feeling unloved, due to emotional neglect. It can occur in a toxic family where siblings are abusing one another and parents have lost control. It can happen if you have ADD and ADHD and you become aware that you simply do not function like your peers, and your teachers are now shaming you, and they're making you feel like there's something wrong with you and you've been undiagnosed. You can experience shame for being adopted and being adopted into even a loving family, but you experience even more shame if you're adopted into a toxic family. And mom has a hard time bonding with you, which I've also heard of. This can occur in school if you feel different. When you have shame, you feel different and unable to connect, and therefore you don't feel like you belong. And so you feel like you're on the outside. You feel very, very alone. So you feel alone, and then shame makes it impossible for you to tell people what you're really going through because you're ashamed of these events. And so unwinding this and unpacking this so we can heal the inner child, so the inner child knows, dear one, it's not your fault. This is not your fault, dear one. If you're carrying shame from an alcoholic family, or if you were abused by your siblings and no one said anything, or if you were rejected by the peers or your teachers, or if you're struggling with ADD or ADHD or anxiety or depression, that is not your fault. There is a way out. And the oversimplified answer to it, in my own opinion, is recognizing where this comes from and then helping your inner child understand it's not your fault, which is essentially empathy. So rather than get empathy from the outside, which I learned on my healing journey, I was not getting empathy. The empathy that I really needed, I wasn't getting because I still hid. And I didn't even know, really, it took a lot of journaling work, a lot of self-work, self-healing work to get to the core of what are you really ashamed of? And it was at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 5 o'clock in the morning with my pot of green tea and my candle burning, with me and my pen and my journal, where I was ferociously writing about what it felt like to be an inner child and go, oh my God, there it is. There is the shame. It was in those moments, right? Those very sacred moments where my heart space started to open up. And so it was the empathy of self, learning, teaching self-empathy that really helped shift me over time. So according to Brene Brown, shame grows through secrecy, silence, and judgment. It makes sense, right? We don't talk about our shame, right? We stay silent and we judge ourselves ferociously. So what shamed us becomes our inner narrative because it becomes internalized. And like I said earlier, shame affects the way you think. But shame will cause you to live small. You will not live large. You will be afraid of the critics, and the critics are real. They are real. And whatever you are struggling with internally will manifest. That's the freaky thing. So, since I started life coaching and writing a book, and oftentimes it's the people of your family, like, who do you think you are? Like, who's going to read your book? Okay, and yet my book went to an Amazon bestseller overnight the minute it was launched. I'm not a formally trained writer. I didn't go to school to become a writer, but I wrote from my heart. Why? Because I wanted to help you. I wanted to help someone out there who was struggling the same way I was and the children in my family were. Why? Because suffering sucks. And suffering, once you really start to dig deep and you start to heal the shame that binds you, thank you, Mr. John Bradshaw, once you start to heal, you get to align with source energy that you are. Source is always there, Abraham Hicks. Source is always there trying to work through you, but you need to be in the power of now. Thank you, Eckhart Tolle, right? And you've got to be the only one pulling your strings. Thank you, Wayne Dyer. I've done my reading, dear ones, like all of these amazing lessons that these incredible teachers like Louise Hay, you have to love yourself. And when you love yourself, your body can heal. We're all saying the same thing. Like source, love is the hub of the universe, right? If you look at nature, nature is beautiful. Nature just unfolds beautifully. And there's a certain order, right? And it's a beautiful thing when you observe nature and you see a sun beaming in the sky, and you see a flower begin to ebb in the direction of the sun. Flowers don't ebb away from the sun. They ebb towards the sun. It's a beautiful thing. And they flourish in the sun. The same thing for you. That's love. And nature is in alignment with love. We are not, if we have been wounded. We don't allow ourselves, or we're so disconnected from love because we don't feel like we belong. We feel alone and we feel ashamed, dear ones, and that's not our fault. So love is not flowing through us. This is the recipe I think it should have been. Love, I am, but I come to planet Earth, and if love my mother is not, because of her childhood programming, love she does not flow. I become starved of love. As a conscious human being, unlike a flower, but flowers have consciousness, but I digress. As a conscious little human being, my brain begins to react to this lack of love, this lack of warmth, this lack of attention. It's all a lack of love, if you think about it. Lack of maternal warmth. And what happens? My brain begins to become wired. Now, the lack of love is affecting me physically. And what happens? Now, it gets locked into my subconscious mind. So feeling unloved creates shame. Now it creates an inner dialogue. My inner dialogue affects my actions, right? My beliefs, my thinking, my feeling, my actions. I'm playing it small. I'm codependent. I don't leave toxic relationships. I don't speak up at work. I'm not living my passion. I'm not doing the things that I want to do on the weekend. I'm afraid to end that really narcissistic relationship with my friend. I'm afraid of being alone. This is the best it's going to get. Who do I think I am? Maybe I'm just too picky. I could never do something great. I'm not great. And yet we all have the potential to be great. And so I think the lack of love from the outside prevents us from being able to feel love on the inside. And so I don't know how to self-care. I don't know, what is self-care? Self-love. I don't know how to love self. I've been taught that the self that I am is unworthy. I'm not good enough, not even for my own mom. I deserve to be unhappy. I deserve to walk around in rags. I deserve to have rotting teeth. I deserve not to buy myself a new pair of glasses. I deserve to have holes in my shoes. I deserve to feel, scarcity. I deserve it. I'm not worthy of abundance. That's for other people. And then you know what I do? I'm pissed off because other people are doing well and I'm not, but I don't understand the internal dialogue, right? No one stopped me long enough, or I haven't stopped long enough to go within. Eckhart Tolle, the stillness within, meditation, right? Go within. Look within. Even the Bible tells us, love others as you love the self. The Bible is wrought with this information about the law of attraction, that the answers are within. You have to be a man or a woman of a new mind. You have to absorb knowledge. You can't reject it. You have to absorb knowledge. You've got to get your house in order. The house is you. The house begins with your mental mind, correcting what's in your mind. Vulnerability means you're exposing yourself, which means that you're open to criticism, which means that you're open to rejection, which means what? The shame is still there, but I'm playing a game when I'm people pleasing. I'm playing a game when I'm playing it small, when I really don't speak out, or I become the person I think you want me to be. I'm playing it small. I'm keeping the shame tentacles in the background, right? But they're there. They're there. It's just a game. Codependency is a game, right? And it's rooted in shame. And healing from codependency means that I heal the shame that binds me, and I live in the now with meditation, and I'm doing my journaling, and I'm staying above the veil, and I find the courage to change, which we learn in Al-Anon. Al-Anon is about finding the courage to change. And to change, you have to be vulnerable. You have to expose what is keeping you stuck. And that is scary. But if we all learn to do it, we would be a world of very happy people, very compassionate people. And even if we bumped up against someone who is narcissistic, who is critical and condemning, we could say namaste and walk away. That's my new favorite saying. The thing with shame, it also weakens your ability to be creative. And law of attraction, source is creative. Source flows through you. And look at the world. The world is a creative canvas, right? Mountains, lions and tigers and zebras and giraffes and valleys and hills and oceans and thousands of ocean creatures and thousands of species of flowers. So we know that source, the source, whether you call source God or a spirit or energy, we know the process, whatever source is, it's creative, right? Because look at the canvas, it's so colorful, so it's creative. We are creative beings because source, Holy Spirit, or just source, energy, flows through us. And I am at my best self when I'm being creative. Now, to be creative, I can't be full of shame because shame is going to prevent me from being creative. I write poetry, but I don't show anybody. That's shame. So source, you're lining up with it. There's some aspect of you that recognizes that you love poetry, but you stick it in the bottom drawer. God forbid anybody see it. That's vulnerability. That risks exposure. That is the effect of shame. Or shame is the cause, and feeling afraid to expose yourself is so frightening that you hide it, right? You're suppressing yourself, you're playing small, you're not being your true self because you're afraid of what will happen if you expose yourself, of shame because of some childhood experience that made you feel like you're not good enough. You've internalized it, and now I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And the scariest thing in the world would be for you to bring your book to someone and have them go, that sucks, now you don't want to do that, right? But yet, we have to do that. That's courageous. What I've learned in terms of codependency is that I have to be willing to sing the song that's on my heart, even if you reject it. I have to be able to be myself and put myself out there, even if you say, you suck, you suck, you suck. It's not easy to put yourself out there, but it's courageous to do so. Because when you do, you risk being rejected. But when you're codependent, you make your life about needing the permission and the approval and the validation of someone outside of you. I say, screw that. I'm done. I'm done. I'm not perfect. I still have a way to go. Every once in a while, this shame tentacle smacks me upside my head. I'm like, whoa, what's that? You know, every once in a while, someone says something really nasty. I have 2 people in my life that are still capable of triggering that in me. You know, I start to twitch a little bit when they get too close, you know, I'm sure you know what that feels like. And I have to be careful not to allow myself to become too activated by certain people. You know, in terms of healing the ego, we have to recognize that people are always projecting. That you're doing something that they wish they were doing, or they feel bad about themselves in some way. Oftentimes they project, right? And so making you feel less than, it's a hit, right? So it's almost like tension builds in someone's body that doesn't like you for some reason. Their tension builds in their body, and then they hit you with it, and then their tension is relieved. But the goal is to hurt you, right? So I think that's really, really unhealthy, passive aggressive, and sometimes it's absolutely overt, and sometimes it's covert. But I really think we need to see it very, very clearly and recognize that unhealthy people do that. And people are entitled to their opinions, and not to spend too much time worrying about what people say. Because as you peel yourself off the wall, you're going to be clumsy in the beginning when you try something new, and you're going to be afraid. But that's the definition of courage. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. It could be a career choice. You could be a lawyer, and now you want to be a yoga teacher. You're telling your family, I went to school to be a lawyer, but I really feel this calling to be a yoga teacher. Or like this film person that was at my house a couple of days ago. I've never done film before. I've never created a documentary before. I might suck at it, but I'm going to do it. These are the people that we admire the most. I know I do. You know, the people who didn't have it easy, you know, the people who came from really humble beginnings and like kept at it. Like the Madonnas, whether you like Madonna or not, you know, you understand her childhood story. It's tough, you know, but she was a champion. She just kept going at it. And are you kidding me? Whether you like her or not, it's irrelevant. Just look at her determination. If you look at people like Tony Robbins, right? A man larger than life. Think about how if you don't know his story, you should learn about his story. Les Brown is another one. Listen to his story. Listen to these people who have come from literally nothing and have been courageous enough to peel themselves off the wall. No one is, and I don't know, think about this, like, who's attacking Tony Robbins for not having a PhD? And yet this man is larger than life, right? And so who says that you don't have a song on your heart that you're not meant to sing? And who says that it's not valuable? There's someone that needs to know what you know. There's something that you do that someone else wants to know how you did it. And I don't think you need a P and an H and a D to teach someone. Teach. I'm not saying diagnose. I'm not saying treat. I'm saying teach, encourage, and support. Big, big difference, right? So if you're a Reiki healer and you feel energetically drawn to helping people and Reiki is your thing, go for it. If you feel like a spiritual teacher and you understand spiritual teachings, right? Go for it. If there's someone that needs you to help them through something that you've been through, be their guide, be their mentor, go for it. Don't let naysayers and don't let, bomb throwers, right, inhibit your ability to do what you have come to do as an incarnated human being, right? Source has incarnated in you. Now it's up to you to incarnate physically, in physical form, what it is you've come to do. It's a process. To me, this is conscious evolution. This is evolution. It's an evolution of mind, and we're all participating in it. But I want you to feel soothed. I want you to feel not so alone in working through this quagmire. I want you to feel inspired. Why? Because the world has enough darkness in it. We're walking water bottles of energy at about almost 100 degrees. Imagine how many water bottles are walking around planet Earth. What are you resonating with? What are you resonating with? If you're resonating with shame, you are sending that energy out into the universe, right? That doesn't help you. It doesn't help the world. It doesn't help me. But what happens when we shift shame? That changes you. And now the walking water bottle that you are, the energy in you changes. And that affects us. It affects humanity. And so this helps us as we heal shame. We love ourselves, we develop self-empathy, and we become much more compassionate human beings for other people. And when our friend or our child comes to us and says, Mommy, I'm afraid of this, we don't shush them away. We don't shame them because we didn't feel loved by our own mothers. No, we say, I understand. Tell me more. I've been through this too. This happened to me too, right? I understand where you're coming from. Of course you feel this way, dear one. Of course you do. It could be no other way. Of course you feel this way. You're a compassionate human being. This person hurt your feelings. They didn't care about you. That's terribly, terribly difficult to deal with. But you are enough, and you are valid, and you are worthy, right? And people who are mean to you, that's their issue. Keep that on their side of the fence, right? Don't be manipulated by people who suggest that you should take care of them, that don't take care of you. Don't fall for the guilt. Don't fall for the manipulation. Don't allow someone to manipulate your empathy against you to get you to do what they want you to do. You don't have to tolerate that, dear one. But know that those of us who do so because of shame. I hope what you hear me saying is that you are enough. I'm like you. We are basically mirrors of one another, and it's our job to make sure that we walk with integrity and that we're courageous enough to deal with the shame inside of us so that no one else can use it as a weapon of destruction against us. Shame is a weapon of mass destruction. And the more empathy we have for the self and the more self-loving we are, the less other people are able to hurt us. And I just think that's a beautiful thing. So shine on, dear one. You are enough. Remember, it's not you. It's your programming. Hey, if you love this content, don't forget to check out the next video, and you can go to my website and take the codependency quiz.